Have you ever stayed in a hotel room that feels alive, like it's watching you? This is the chilling story of Sarah Green and her unforgettable stay at the old Crestwood in the fall of 2019. Nestled on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts, the Crestwood was a faded, forgotten place. Sarah, on a tight budget, booked their cheapest option, room 13. She figured the number was just a silly superstition. But as she would soon learn, some superstitions have a terrifying way of becoming real. The moment she stepped inside, a sense of unease washed over her. The hallway was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of damp carpet. The walls were cracked with age, and the receptionist, without even looking up from his desk, handed her the key. He muttered, almost too quiet to hear, "Room 13. Don't stay up too late." Sarah gave a nervous laugh, assuming he was just trying to be spooky, and made her way down the narrow, shadowy corridor. Room 13 was even smaller and more decrepit than she had imagined. The furniture was ancient, the wallpaper was peeling away from the walls in long curling strips, and a single, weak lamp cast long, dancing shadows across the floor. Exhausted from her trip, she dropped her bag and collapsed onto the lumpy bed. That's when she saw it. Sitting on the nightstand, as if waiting for her, was a small, leather-bound journal. The cover was blank, the pages yellowed and brittle with age. Her curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up and opened it to the first page. The handwritten words sent a jolt of ice through her veins. "I see you. I've been waiting." She slammed it shut, her heart pounding. "It's just a prank," she told herself, left by a previous guest. But the feeling of being watched intensified. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating, like trying to breathe through a wet cloth. She got up to look out the window, hoping for a glimpse of the outside world, but it was pitch black. No moon, no stars, just an oppressive inky void that seemed to be pressing against the glass. And then she heard it. A soft, scraping sound coming from inside the closet. Scray up. Her blood ran cold. She tried to convince herself it was just the old building settling, the pipes groaning, but the sound grew louder, more deliberate. It was the sound of something dragging itself closer. Her hand trembling, she grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming the beam at the closet door. It was slightly ajar. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she crept toward it, her every instinct screaming at her to run. She pushed the door open. Inside, nothing, just empty hangers and a deep, unnatural shadow that stretched and warped along the back wall, a shadow that didn't belong. Trying to calm her frantic nerves, she went back to the bed, her eyes darting around the room, and that's when it happened. The journal on the nightstand moved. It didn't fall, it slid. Slowly, deliberately, it slid across the smooth surface of the wood, inching toward her as if guided by an unseen hand. She was frozen in terror. The pages began to flip on their own, rustling in the dead-still air, stopping on a new, freshly written message. "You can leave, but I will follow." The hours that followed were a living nightmare. Sleep was impossible. Every time she dared to close her eyes, she would see flickers of movement in the corners of her vision. She heard whispers, so faint they were like the brush of a feather against her ear. A profound, bone-deep chill crawled up her spine and refused to leave. Then, at exactly 3:13 a.m., the shadows in the room began to gather. They coalesced in the corner, darkening, deepening, until they formed a shape. A figure, tall, slender, and utterly faceless. It stood silently at the foot of her bed, just watching. By morning, it was gone. The room was just a room again. The shadows had receded, the journal was closed, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Sarah didn't wait. She grabbed her bag and fled. As she checked out, the receptionist looked up at her, a strange, knowing smile on his face. "Room 13, he said, his voice a low whisper. "Most people don't last the night." To this day, Sarah is haunted by that experience. She says that sometimes, when she drives past the Crestwood and late at night, she can see a faint, solitary light glowing in the window of room 13, a soft, welcoming light, as if it's waiting for her to return. She knows, with absolute certainty, that... Have you ever picked up a stranger and lived to tell the tale? Let me tell you what happened to Emma Sullivan on a cold, rainy night that she'll never ever forget. It was October 14th, 2015. Emma was driving alone along Route 67 near Carson, Nevada. If you know that road, you know it's long, it's lonely, and it stretches for miles through empty desert and dark forests. The rain was relentless, hitting her windshield like tiny drumbeats, and her headlights cut through the darkness just enough to see the wet asphalt ahead. She felt uneasy that night, a quiet, creeping feeling that something was off, but she shrugged it away. blaming it on the storm and her exhaustion from a long shift at work. Then, in the distance, she saw a figure. At first she thought it was just a tree or maybe a road sign, but as she got closer, she realized it was a woman, completely drenched from head to toe, her hair plastered to her pale, gaunt face. She was trembling violently, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, a fear or maybe desperation. The woman stepped toward the road and whispered so faintly Emma had to roll down her window twice just to hear her. "I need a lift." Emma hesitated. The rational part of her mind screamed not to stop. We all know the rules. Strangers on lonely roads are not safe. And yet, there was something about this woman that made her pause. Her eyes seemed pleading, helpless, vulnerable. Emma could see the rain dripping off the woman's hair, forming tiny streams that ran down her cheeks like tears. With a deep breath, a breath she probably shouldn't have taken, Emma unlocked the doors and said, "Hop in for the first few minutes." There was only the sound of rain on the roof and the rhythmic hum of the windshield wipers. The woman sat silently, just staring out the passenger window into the blackness. Emma tried to make conversation, but her words came out awkward and nervous. "Bad night to be out, huh?" Silence. "Where are you headed?" More silence. Then, without warning, the woman slid a folded scrap of paper across the center console. Her hands were shaking so violently that the paper just wobbled there. Emma picked it up, her own fingers a little unsteady now. She unfolded it slowly. On the front, written in neat, tiny letters, were 3 words that made her blood run cold. "She saw you first." Emma turned to speak, to ask what it meant, to ask who she was. And that's when she noticed the seat beside her was empty. Completely, utterly empty. The passenger door was wide open, letting in the cold rain, soaking the floor mat, but she hadn't heard it click or swing. The woman was just gone. Her hands trembled as she picked up the note again, and that's when she noticed the back. A single drop of dark red, still wet, glimmered under the faint light of her dashboard. She stared at it, frozen, as her mind raced. Was this real? Was she dreaming? She couldn't comprehend it. Emma slammed on the brakes, her heart pounding against her ribs, and immediately called the police. When they arrived, they found nothing. No missing person report matched the description of the woman. No fingerprints, no footprints. No evidence anywhere on that entire stretch of Route 67. All they found was the note, the puddle of water on her passenger side floor, and Emma's own racing heartbeat. Weeks went by. Emma couldn't sleep. Every night she'd wake up drenched in sweat, instinctively glancing at the clock. And every single night, without fail, it was 3:07 a.m., the exact time she had picked up the stranger. She would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of rain, hearing footsteps she wasn't sure were real. She'd wake up to shadows in the corner of her room she couldn't explain, whispers that seemed to come from just behind her shoulder. Her friends told her it was stress, that she was just imagining things, but Emma knew what she saw. She knew the feeling of absolute terror that had stuck to her like glue that night. The note, the blood, the impossible disappearance, it wasn't just a story she could tell and then forget. It was real, and it stayed with her every single day. Even now, whenever it rains, whenever she finds herself driving alone on a dark road, she checks her mirrors twice, maybe 3 times more than usual. She thinks about the woman, about those 3 chilling words. She saw you first, and she wonders who was watching her that night. Who will watch you if you ever decide to pick up a stranger? Could you survive a ride from someone you don't know? Could you make it through the storm, the rain, and the deafening silence, without paying a price? Think carefully, because for Emma, that night changed everything, and it could happen to you. Have you ever been inside a house that feels wrong, not haunted, not cursed, but just aware of you? That's what happened to Daniel Price in the winter of 2021, when he rented a small farmhouse in rural Vermont. He was a writer, looking for a quiet place to finish a manuscript. Instead, he found something else entirely. The landlord was a thin, jittery man with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. He insisted on showing Daniel every single part of the house, except for one. "The attic stairs don't open," he said, a little too quickly. Daniel didn't think much of it. Old houses have old problems, right? But on that very first night, he noticed a door at the end of the upstairs hallway, a door he was sure had Ewan been there during the tour. It was narrow and old, with peeling green paint. It had no handle, just a keyhole. Something about it made his skin crawl. He tried his best to ignore it, but the house didn't want to be ignored. Strange things began happening almost immediately. The temperature would drop so suddenly that his breath would fog in his own living room. He'd hear footsteps creaking above him late at night, right where the sealed attic was supposed to be. And the most unsettling part, every single morning, without fail, the narrow green door at the end of the hall would be just a little bit more open than the night before, even though it had no handle. One night, Daniel was deep into his writing when he heard whispering. It was faint, urgent, like someone trying desperately not to be heard. He got up and followed the sound. It was coming from behind the attic door. He cautiously leaned in, pressing his ear against the cold wood. Instantly, the whispering stopped. A single sharp knock echoed from the other side. His blood turned to ice. Daniel stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest, and that's when he noticed something new. A small envelope was lying on the floor, seemingly pushed out from under the attic door. His hand shook as he picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single scrap of paper, yellowed and brittle with age. In a shaky, spidery handwriting, it read, "Don't let me out again." Again, his mind spun. What did that mean? Asterisk again, asterisk. He dropped the paper and bolted downstairs, refusing to look back at that door, but the house wasn't finished with him yet. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the coldest, darkest moment of the night, Daniel was ripped from his sleep by the sound of the attic door creaking slowly, fully open. He froze in his bed, every muscle tensed. Footsteps began to creep down the hallway. They were slow dragging. They paused right outside his bedroom door. He stared wide-eyed as the doorknob began to twitch. It turned, and then, a whisper right in his ear, even though he hadn't heard his door open. "You left me too long." Daniel bolted upright, screaming. The room was empty. The house was completely silent, but he'd had enough. At the first light of dawn, he grabbed his bags, threw them in his car, and sped down the long driveway without looking back even once. When he returned the keys, the landlord didn't seem surprised at all. "Most people leave early," was all he said. But here's the thing that will truly chill you. Daniel swears that every few weeks, no matter where he is, New York, Boston, it doesn't matter, he finds a small, yellowed scrap of paper waiting for him. Sometimes it's on his car windshield, sometimes on his doorstep. It's always the same handwriting, and always the same message. "Don't let me out." He doesn't know what will happen if that door ever opens completely, or if the thing that was behind it finally finds him for good. So let me ask you, would you stay a night in that farmhouse? Or would you leave before the attic finds you? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more strange stories.